Hello and welcome to Q&A on Consciousness TV. Today we'll be looking at the state of consciousness that we experience as human beings when we're in 3D, 4D, 5D and beyond. So the terminology that I'll be using today is one that's been really commonly used for quite a long time now. 3D referring to normal everyday consciousness, everyday existence on planet Earth. Here we are in 3D, chop wood, carry water. And 4D, 5D and beyond as being states of experience, of awareness, of being that are different from our experience of self and the world in 3D. Now, we can be living in a 3D collective reality, but functioning in 4D or 5D or beyond. We don't have to wait for the entire collective of human beings to transition out of 3D or third dimensional perception in order to make that transition ourselves. So this is a process that occurs entirely within for every single one of us. And there are certain experiences, processes that we go through as we transition from one dimension of perception to another that are common to those transitions, that are common to those experiences. And so we can talk about those and we can discuss them and we can commiserate with each other and reflect upon what we're experiencing and understand what is really being asked of us or what we're being invited to during each stage of that transition from 3D through 4D to 5D and beyond. So this is a really juicy topic today, and I've got my little whiteboard here. I'm going to be doing a few simple diagrams on the whiteboard to illustrate the dynamics of moving particularly from 4D to 5D. So settle down and make yourself comfortable, have a cup of coffee or herb tea, and we'll look at this topic of dimensional shift in terms of human perception and the way that we function in relation to our lives. So in 3D, we're all familiar with 3D. In 3D, life is an experience of opposing forces. We're hot, we're cold. We're hungry, we've been fed. We have desires and needs, and we meet those desires and needs, and then those needs and desires arise again. So it's a bit like a kind of treadmill where we're constantly being moved by fears and necessities. And when our needs are met, we temporarily relax and enjoy that, and then the need, the necessity arises again, or we become afraid again of not having what we need. And those needs can be physical, they can be social and emotional needs. They can even be spiritual needs related to the emotional and the physical, like needing to have a sense of where we fit in with the universe, of where we belong. So for most of our existence as human beings, so I'm speaking now of reincarnation, where we come back into a physical body again and again and again, and have lives on the inner planes between our physical incarnations. For most of that time, we are in 3D. Our souls have agreed to play the game of 3D, and that involves falling asleep to our larger nature as pure consciousness. So it's not a mistake that we fall asleep, that we become unaware, that we believe we are this character in this body, in this story. The story is in fact designed that way. So that's part of the delight of it. That cosmic consciousness, which could be anything that it wanted and have any experience it wants, has chosen to have this experience of needs and longings, of fear and necessity and tenderness and vulnerability and intimacy. And to make that story feel real, it has to forget most of what it is. That the self in that larger context is only experienced occasionally, as an epiphany, as a moment of realization, as a moment of openness to the depth of life. And we all have those experiences throughout our time in 3D, but the majority of our time is spent in this struggling to meet the necessities of life, briefly enjoying the fact that we've had our needs met, but always being a little afraid that maybe our next meal won't be forthcoming, or that our loved one may die, or that we may become sick or suffer injury or pain, or that on the day we want the sun to shine, it rains. Yeah. So there's an unpredictability, a chaos factor to life in 3D, in space, matter and time in 3D. That's exhilarating, it's exciting, but it's also terrifying. And it's a world of duality, it's a world of opposites, it's a world of objects and forces acting upon each other, and outcomes that can't be predicted, at least at the surface level, can't be predicted when we look at our lives. It's a place where conditioning is at play. It's an environment of life where people have free will and can do unexpected things, and even promises that we've made before incarnating may not be kept when we have incarnated. We may decide to change our minds. So there are a lot of variables which can be at times confusing, at times exhilarating and a great deal of fun. But after a while, and I'm saying after a number of thousands of years, sometimes tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years, depending on how long you've been incarnating here, you've learned everything you need to learn from that experience. And you have developed all the qualities of love that you sought to develop as a soul through this human 3D journey. And then something starts to shift inside you. Instead of being fully committed to the story, you start to feel a little more disinterested in it. It's a bit Groundhog Day. You feel like you've done this again and again and again. You may start to feel a bit bored by it, no longer excited by things. And you may even start to question the purpose of existence. That surely we're not just here to be born and eat and procreate and die. There must be more to it than that. And you naturally are magnetically drawn into the next stage of your process, out of 3D and into 4D, which is a phase of spiritual awakening and also of deepening love. So in 3D, we're really all about ourselves. We're all about survival. And everything appears to us to be solid and real. Whereas in fact, the whole experience of life on Earth is like lucid dreaming. But lucid dreaming within a very dense field of vibration, so dense that it appears to be solid, consistent, immovable. You know the saying, the irresistible force meets the immovable object. That's life in 3D. Life sucks and then you die. And then you want to fulfill your past longings, so you come back again and you have a wish fulfillment incarnation in 3D. So the move to 4D starts to happen as you grow tired of that irresistible force, immovable object type of existence, and you start to see through matter more. You start to long to see the meaning behind the story. You seek spiritual understanding, and also your heart starts to open, so you become more and more empathic. You become more aware of the needs of others around you. That gradually starts happening in the later stages of 3D, because this is more like a continuum than separate dimensions. It's a continuum of increasing consciousness within your mind-body field. So you gradually outgrow 3D and become more 4D over time. And in the 4D phase, you engage in spiritual practice, or philosophy begins to interest you. You begin to inquire more deeply into the meaning of life and the meaning of your daily circumstances. And you start to have more empathy, more care and concern for those around you. And more of your essence, the essence that you've developed over sometimes hundreds of thousands of years, begins to shine through your energy field. You begin to be more altruistic, more selfless, more other-focused, rather than being just focused on meeting your own needs or fulfilling your own longings. Your longings become really more directed to helping others feel happy, helping them feel good, meeting their wishes and protecting them, caring for them, helping to solve their problems. So 4D is a phase where you may become a doctor or a nurse or a counsellor, or whatever you do becomes a true service to others. Even if you make shoes or clothes or you grow food, you're doing it more and more from a sense of serving others rather than just what that might give you. And that phase in 4D is not as long as the phase in 3D, but is still quite prolonged. And it deepens and deepens and deepens, and there are various crises in that 4D phase where we are called to go beyond ourselves, where we may find ourselves in extremely challenging situations, where we're called to be courageous, selfless and altruistic, to the point of hurting ourselves in the process. We are so other-focused. And there's a hope or a wish implicit in that phase that if only we could love enough, then the world would heal. Then suffering would stop. There would be no more sickness or poverty or loneliness. If only we could love enough, then the world would become love. And the reason we believe that is because we have begun to experience the power of love inside ourselves. Both our love for others and what that produces in terms of real effects of kindness in the world and improved circumstances for everyone. But we've also begun to experience periods of connection to divine love, infinite love, pure consciousness. Sometimes they may just be a few seconds in duration. Sometimes they may be a day or two or a week or a month or a year of feeling completely carried by a larger love. And more, as that phase of 4D deepens, we want everyone to have that love, to know that love. Because it's becoming the centre of our life. It's becoming the centre of our sense of meaning. And it's almost as though we're looking at a world that is starving, and we know where the banquet is, and we just want to keep handing out leaflets that say, this is where the banquet's being held. And we may have found that through a religious tradition, we may have found it outside of a religious tradition, but we are 100% sure in those later stages of 4D that there is something transcendentally powerful, loving and intelligent that is carrying everything that we as human beings are part of and have access to, if we want it. And the suffering in the last stages of 4D consciousness, 4D perception, is that the majority of people around us don't want to listen. Our suffering is that we can feel the love, at least some of the time, the big love, and yet we cannot adequately convince others of its existence. We cannot invite them enough into that experience, and there is a grief in that, a sense of loss, despair, helplessness. Krishnamurti called it the pathless land, where nothing that we've done in the past works anymore, where all the strategies that we've used don't appear to work anymore, and where our deepest longing, which is to serve all human beings, to serve all of life, to bring about heaven on earth, to help people connect to that love that we've discovered, and that doesn't work. That is the last gate. The last phase of acceptance of the story of free will. The last phase of acceptance of the story of free will. And to really pass through that last gate requires surrender. A surrender deeper into that great love that we've been experiencing. That is a deeper dive than we have ever done before. Where those last human parts of us, those last parts of us that have been characters in the story of human life, that have been for so long a good, kind, helpful, loving character in the story of human life, even those have to be surrendered. All human desire, even the desire to save the world, has to be surrendered to pass through the gate from 4D to 5D and beyond. Jesus, Yeshua, illustrated the process of these initiations, of these expansions of consciousness during his lifetime. And he did that consciously all the way to the crucifixion and beyond. So the part of his life where he was overlighted and performing miracles was the third initiation, and a time of great luminosity, awareness, bliss and empowerment, of coherence. And then he illustrated his willingness to release the collective through the process of the crucifixion. It's a very, very deep story, archetypal story, that he walked as a man 2,000 years ago. And it's a story, a process that is just as relevant for us today as we make the transition from 3D through 4D and into 5D. Even though the culture that surrounds us is very different, the technology that surrounds us is completely different to the way life was 2,000 years ago. The principles of awakening remain the same. That there is that moment, there is a repeat invitation in the last stages of 4D to release the insistence that the world wake up, to release the insistence that the world heal, and to accept the existence of continued suffering even as you transcend that suffering. And this is the transition point that many people are facing now. We've been through life in 3D for many incarnations. We've been through life in 4D, living love, living service, living kindness, in the hope that it would heal the suffering. And of course, we've played our part in the awakening of the world during that phase. Every phase is complete unto itself. Every phase is blessed and perfect. Every moment unfolds as it should. And as the new longings arise, or as the accompanying pain related to the old phase becomes apparent, we just have to listen to it. When the boredom arises, we go inwards and we listen deeply to ourselves. What message are we giving ourselves? What are we learning about love now? Not what did we learn about love 100 years ago, which was perfect then, or 5 years ago, or last week, which was perfect then. But what are we learning about love now? So you could liken it to taking part in a play or a rugby game. That for a long time we really enjoy that rugby game. Whether we're a person in the crowd, or with the referee, or with the person waiting on the sidelines to be called on, or we are the person in the middle of the game playing our part for the team. It's juicy. It's precisely where we need to be, where we want to be. It is precisely where our soul has put us. And then there comes a day where we are sitting in the stands, or we're playing on that rugby field, and we're not quite as enthusiastic as we once were. We're kind of looking at the game as though a little bit from a distance. Maybe we're a little bit bored, or maybe for a moment we just feel a great deal of affection for those people, for that game, but we don't feel quite so fired up about it, so fired up about winning, for example. And that feeling increases. Perhaps the boredom increases, the dissatisfaction, the questioning, why did I ever do that? Or should I continue doing this? Or if I'm not doing this, then what would I be doing and why? So maybe you decide to become one of the St. John's ambulance people who rushes onto the rugby field to help people who've been injured, and you decide to play that role in the game because you really want to help and support, but you don't want to compete anymore. You're not interested in winning, you're just interested in helping and serving. Or maybe you decide to sit in the stands and cheer on both teams equally, or just enjoy going there to be with your friends. So your motivation is changing as you're making that transition into 4D. The reason why you're doing things is changing, and the way you're perceiving your experience while you're having the experience changes. You're reflecting more on the experiences that you're having after you have those experiences. So you're becoming more conscious, and you're becoming more conscious rapidly, relatively speaking rapidly, compared to the phase in 3D. However, you can only be in 4D because you've been in 3D, because you've built a body of love, You've built a mind-body field. You've developed chakras. You've developed your energy system in such a way that you can now have a 4D experience in this body, in this mind-body field. So it's all miraculous. And then you come to those later stages of 4D where you are in anguish because of the suffering of the world. Because when you rush onto that rugby field with your stretcher to pick up that guy that's lying injured on the ground and his neck is broken and you can't save him, you feel his suffering, you feel the suffering of all the fans in the stadium, the suffering of all his fellow teammates, and you feel the suffering of his family, and you realize you can do nothing to prevent that. When the Buddha said all life is suffering, that is what he meant. All life in 3D involves highs and lows, gains and losses, the joys of life and the sorrows of life. In 4D, we're still experiencing those joys and sorrows, but they're not just our own sorrows. They are the joys and sorrows of the people around us, and ultimately, with the opening of the 7th petal of the heart chakra, they are the sorrows and joys of the whole planet. It is a crucifixion. You're being crucified with every person who is suffering. And there is only one way out. Not by ending the suffering of people in 3 and 4D, because they are entitled to that journey, just as you have been entitled to that journey. They're entitled to the magic of that, just as you have been. And that cannot be rushed. And so in that very final stage of 4D, you recognize that. Prior to recognizing it, there may be periods of despair, overwhelm, helplessness, loss of faith in God, feelings of disconnection as you pull back from that suffering and feel numb. But the love that is within you, the consciousness that is within you and around you, the great love, is calling you home to yourself. And so any shields that you place over yourself, any despair that clouds your connection to that great heart, does get dissolved, is healed. Your urge to wake up, your urge for liberation, will overcome all those things, all those apparent obstacles, and in that you will develop those last qualities of mercy, compassion, and forgiveness that will take you through the gate into 5D and beyond. And so now what I'd like to look at and to share with you is the nature of 5D, which is so radically, drastically different from 4D and 3D. It's the reason why there is so much psychic tension, emotional tension, and perceptual tension in the mind-body field in that last phase. There is a real gathering of awareness to dissolve the veil that separates you from your own cosmic nature. And that means that the identities that you have identified with, the characters in the story that you have believed yourself to be, must be relinquished. And it's not that you cease to exist. That's a misunderstanding of non-duality. As you move from duality to non-duality across that 4D to 5D interface, what's actually happening is the constructs are dissolving. And they are actually energetically dissolving. they exist as clouds in the energy field, as magnetic balls of energy, as swirling masses of magnetic charge, and they exist as knots or contracted areas in the very fine strands of light which make up the structured levels of your mind-body field. So the Kundalini, or the coming of consciousness, sometimes as a gentle flow, sometimes as a fountain, sometimes as a waterfall, and sometimes like a tidal wave, serves to wash away those magnetic holdings. The Kundalini undoes the things of time within you. So it will cloud bust the clouds so the sun of consciousness can shine. It will reduce the density of the frequency of your energy field so that it becomes more transparent to the light that you are. This is a real process. It's a biophysical, energetic process as well as a perceptual one. So there are lots of sensations in the body as that fire of consciousness comes into the contractions. It can be quite uncomfortable. You can even become ill for a while from that process if the contractions are very, very tight, very, very old. And there's no right or wrong in this. There's no sense of badness that you have contractions or you have magnetic imprints or clouds in your field. That's normal from, it is the residue of 3D and 4D experience. In fact, the more deeply you've incarnated, the more clouds and more contractions are in your energy field. And out of those clouds, out of those magnetic pools of energy and out of those contracted, knotted up threads come qualities of consciousness that are deeper than the universe has ever experienced before. And within this, your freedom is inevitable. Your liberation into the realm of pure consciousness, taking everything you have experienced with you as qualities of consciousness, is inevitable. And that is the joy, and that is the peace that passes all human understanding. That is the interface where your suffering is turned into joy, where your suffering becomes love, the big love, and you return to the fullness of your divine nature. And these things are not just philosophy, they're not just some ancient religious reflections on like a fantasy. They are a biophysical, perceptual, energetic and evolutionary reality that is going to be viscerally experienced by every single one of us on this planet. And we're at an amazing juncture now in the planetary process where hundreds of thousands of people, at the minimum, are going to be going through into awakened or ascended awareness at the same time. In the past, it's been awakenings in small numbers, individuals here and there, small groups of monks or nuns or mystics or yogis. Now it's going to be ordinary people leading ordinary lives, waking up to the fullness of understanding, the fullness of insight into resurrected and ascended awareness. It is miraculous. And as the hundreds of thousands of people go into this new state of awareness, out of 3D, out of 4D, into 5D and beyond, it creates a vibrational resonance in the planetary field, in the planetary body, that stimulates and supports the awakening of all beings. So awakening will become easier and easier and easier and more instantaneously accessible the more this process unfolds. So if you are one of those souls who's been in the front lines of this, who's been in the earlier stages, before there was a collective awakening, when it was still just an awakening here, an awakening there, individuals and small groups, it's been hard. You will have clouds of suffering in your energy field. You will have knots of suffering on the structured layers of your field, and that's nothing to be ashamed about. In fact, shame and self-judgment are among the last things to be healed as we go through from 4D to 5D. Feelings of failure need to be accepted and transformed. Feelings of self-loathing, self-judgment, self-hatred, they need to be transformed into self-love so we can pass through into 5D. As long as you persist in holding feelings of disappointment in yourself and in what you have created, disappointment in moments where you wanted to show up as the great love and you just showed up as your human 3D self and you can't let go of that, you will prevent yourself from going through that door. And there is no need to do that. And nothing is served by holding yourself back. So the last key is self-love. And combined with that, the willingness to release others lovingly to their own process without judging them or wanting to change them. Self-love, love of everything, love of everyone, and a deep honouring of the process of life here. Because underlying the entire experience of 3D and 4D is the divine wish to experience free will. The divine wish to experience forgetfulness and then wake up again. And carry from that experience of forgetfulness qualities of love and intimacy and kindness that would otherwise never have been created in the universe. So as we go out of 3D, where kindness is needed to meet experiences of lack, necessity or suffering, kindness becomes a joy to be lived, a vibration of love to be lived for its own sake, to be lived out not to meet suffering and to try and fill a gap, to fill a hunger, but to experience a shared joy, a shared vibration of love. To experience colours of light that together form a symphony of light. That move from 3D and 4D into 5D is a move into joy, into gratitude, into wonder, into adoration, into excitement. And in that, the suffering is dissolved, the struggle is dissolved, and in its place comes the knowing of your own completeness. So that's what I'd like to talk about now, is the quality of our experience of light body in 5D. So the nature of experience in 5D is the feeling that everything is perfect. And that feeling does not come from the world of objects, the world of fear and necessities. It comes from the nature of our existence as pure consciousness and as love, as luminous love intelligence. In this experience of 5D, we are at peace, bathed in a stillness and awareness that recognizes the beauty of what is, that deeply feels the rightness of every moment of time that is unfolding, that recognizes the activity of the soul's decision, the soul's free will in the circumstances of the stories we see playing out around us in people's lives and in the life of the planet. Instead of seeing errors and judging them, instead of seeing things that need fixing and solving, what we see is the choice being made by consciousness to build a body of love. The choice of consciousness to have the experience of limitation so that it can grow in love, so that it can be in a state of intimacy with life. What we are visibly, tangibly connected to is life as unfolding love. And we know that the moment something is not needed, it will no longer exist. We know it is not our business as a character in the story to define when that moment is for any other living being or for the collective. We respect and value the moment. We see the moment as a blessing. We see what arises as what was needed, what was chosen, either consciously or unconsciously, for reasons understood or not understood. We see the strands of intelligence and love that have brought every person into the moment they now experience. And we see all life as blessing and as blessed. And we see it as this even when the body suffers pain or discomfort. And we accept the invitation that pain and discomfort extend to us to dive deeper into who and what we truly are. And we know that this invitation is being extended to all beings by themselves in one way or another, in a way unique to them and chosen by them as perfect for them. And if something changes, it is because it is ripe to change, because of all the moments that have preceded that change and led to that change. So in 5D, we become aware of organic flow, and we become aware of the timelessness that sustains and carries that unfolding flow. And as we deepen and deepen into that space, we are more and more carried and more one with that which carries us. And we enter non-dual awareness, which is not non-awareness of a self. It is awareness that any self that arises is that one self, and that there is beauty and blessing in the arising of individualized selves. So we love the story as much as we love the nothingness. We love the fullness as much as we love the emptiness. And we become spacious with a body like sky. And in the sky, the sun shines. Sometimes it shines softly, delicately, as on a winter's day. And sometimes the sun burns brightly, intensely, as a fire within us and around us. And all objects, all matter, even all unfolding disappears in the power and the intensity and the presence of that love. A love that is immanent within us and all around us, immanent within all of creation. So that is the state that we've given the term Christ consciousness, fully coherent, on fire with love, transcendent and complete, where form is no longer form and time is no longer time, and need and separation, distance, falls away completely, and there is only the beloved. And you are that, and all things are that. And on the way to that awareness, which is the target state for human experience, as one facet of universal experience, one blessing in a constellation, a galaxy of blessings. We have various degrees of experience of that light. The light can be turned brighter, it can be dimmed a little, so we see more form, we sense more form, we can play, we can create, we can have relationship with one another and with life. And we can do that as an act of free will, of our own volition. The characteristic of 5D is that you are no longer a victim. To your perception, there is no such thing as anyone or anything being a victim. There are only willing participants in a game of consciousness. And the reason for the game, the reason for the presence of individualized beings is love. The entire foundation, the premise on which everything is based, is the creation and experience of greater and greater love. So all the doubts and fears that plague us in 3D and 4D about is there a God, is life about love, or is life about punishment, or is it about chaos, does it in fact have a meaning? All those questions disappear in 5D. And there is only the experience of the self as creator. And so now I'm going to just draw a little diagram on the board to illustrate the difference between the feeling of self and relationship to life in 3D, 4D, and that experience of self and life in 5D. So, just having a little look at this board and this very simple diagram. In 3D and even in 4D, we perceive ourselves as living in a world of relationship with people, places, circumstances, events and things, the world around us. And there's a push and pull happening between us and that world around us. You know, maybe that's a person in our life, maybe that's our job, maybe that's our health, that's a circumstance that we find ourselves in on the planet. We're always in relationship of push and pull and trade and exchange, hoping that things will go well, celebrating when they do and grieving when they don't and suffering when they don't. This is life as suffering, as the Buddha explained it. As we begin to wake up and we move more into 4D, the light within us starts to become more apparent. And we begin to relate as love to people, places, circumstances, events and things around us. We begin to see the light in them, though it still appears to be separate from us, and there is still a push and pull effect going on. There is still time, space and distance between us and our environment, though from time to time we will have experiences where our consciousness expands and we have an epiphany, a realization, an awakening event occurs, and we perceive the light in the center more strongly, and we cognitize a different level of reality, and that gets hardwired into us. We never go back from that. However, we're still not fully awakened. We're still perceiving distance, space, matter, time, a world of objects and opposing forces. So we might try to help. So we send out love to try and help, but it doesn't work. We try to save someone's life, or perhaps they've got an addiction and we want to help them overcome that, but we can't. Maybe they die, or maybe they continue to be alcoholic, you know, have challenges in their lives, and maybe they become homeless, and there's nothing we can do. So in this state of empathy, we suffer with them. And that creates a kind of loop of desperation, of where we more and more and more and more and more bind ourselves to try and change things. We're doing it because we love, and we're developing qualities of love. We're actually developing petals in the chakras. We're developing more of our light body, but we're still bound into suffering. We're being crucified along with the people around us, or the animals, or the environment around us. And it actually becomes intolerable. And in the life of the Buddha, what he did was he walked away from everything after discovering that all life was suffering. And he was very hard on himself. So he started starving himself and putting himself through austerities to try and break down this area here, to try and break down the illusion of time, space, matter and distance. But he found that he couldn't break it down through hurting himself, that only worked to a certain degree, but it didn't take him all the way home. So he went really close to death, having been in austerities for many, many years, and he sat under the Bodhi tree and he said, if I die under this tree, then so be it, because I want to awaken. I want to dissolve the veil between myself and the world of the real. And he did enter his own inner dimensions of being, his own hell realms, his own samskaras, imprints, the clouds that were hiding the face of the sun, the contractions, the attachments, the magnetic areas of charge in his field that were peculiar to him and his journey, and he broke through and entered the Pure Land. So in that he had to focus only on kindness, only on loving himself all the way home, not going out into the world saving anyone. He couldn't hold on to that idea of trying to stop suffering in the world. He had to only be under the Bodhi tree. And you'll find at that later stage of 4D experience, we're put under the Bodhi tree in one way or another. It might be through a job loss, it might be through homelessness, it might be through an illness or loss of a loved one, or through depression and despair, you know, crippling depression, and feelings of disconnection that we have to face what we contain. I know Matt Kahn recently talked about, you know, living on a couch and being on a couch wrapped in a blanket for years while he was going through these transitions of consciousness, going through expansions of awareness. And the reason that we're put under our own particular Bodhi tree is otherwise we just jump back out and we try to do this again. Yeah? If we think there's any hope that we can have our wishes fulfilled, and that includes the wish to save the world, we just do this. So we have to have the opportunities to play in that 4D realm taken away. And we do that for ourselves as an act of love. We make a soul level decision to sit under our Bodhi tree. It's just sometimes we forget that we've made that promise to ourselves, and we think we're victims and life is being mean to us and there's no hope. But in actual fact, we've reached a moment of profound spiritual opportunity, and the pressure will just increase and increase until we face the invitation willingly. And that's where acceptance comes in. Acceptance is not resignation. Acceptance is not despair, giving up and rolling over and hiding under the duvet. Acceptance is saying, love has put me right where I am because there's something I need to see, to heal, to understand. I need to liberate myself in this place as an act of love. So really, self-love is that last key to going from 4D to 5D consciousness and beyond. Without self-love, without feeling that loving yourself is enough, you can't make it through that gate. If you think you have to love others to go through that gate, you'll be put in the pressure cooker until you realise there is nothing selfish about sitting under that Bodhi tree. The entire universe is in a state of resonant connection with you in your inner bodies. You have access to the whole planet, and the whole planet has access to you. If you imagine it being like a ball, I'll just do a little diagram here. Imagine actually it's a big sphere, a big space that consciousness creates so it can have an experience. And inside that space are all the samskaras, all the identities that you have, but also that everybody else has in the collective. So 7.5 billion people, all creating these little knots of sense of self, these little knots of suffering, identity, push and pull, as in that diagram up here, it's now down in here. And in the centre of each, of course, is pure consciousness and pure love, luminous love, intelligence. So here, when you contact your own cosmic intelligence and you start working on your field, you are working on the collective field without exerting or having to exert any influence to change anything outside yourself. So you imagine that you have a particular samskara, a particular imprint of, let's say, jealousy, relationship jealousy, that you get jealous very easily and you feel insecure, that your partner is paying attention to others and not to you. As you sit under your Bodhi tree and you really meet that samskara, that contraction right where it sits, with absolute mercy, absolute compassion, acceptance and kindness, you release all judgment. As you do that for yourself, and that knot comes undone in you, by the law of resonance, it makes it easier for someone else to undo that same quality of suffering inside themselves. The quality of suffering, of jealousy, is reduced in the collective. It exists as a potential for some people who are not yet ready to receive that frequency of love. And for others, they may experience a sudden, unexplained lessening of tension in their feelings of jealousy without ever having had to consciously work on themselves. So there's no need to think that as you sit under your Bodhi tree, or you're wrapped in a blanket sitting on your couch or lying in your bed or washing dishes for the umpteenth time in your kitchen, that you're doing nothing for the world. You are acting in a sacred manner. You are acting in a shamanic way that impacts all of life. And you're doing it in a way that doesn't transgress free will and doesn't influence artificially timing in the collective. So those who are not ready to receive that gift of releasing will not receive that gift yet, but it will exist as a potential in the field of the planet for them. Those who are ready to be aware of it, sensitive to it, and open to receive it, will be able to receive it. The deeper your awareness goes, the more you connect with the whole world. The more you realize that your mind-body field is not this little thing, this little object that occupies a specific area of matter and space. As you go in, you'll find that your etheric body, even your etheric body, which looks like strands of light that occupy only a few inches in diameter, is actually as vast as the planet itself. And you will be able to enter the space of your own existence, your own mind-body field, your creative space, and bring about healing. In that, you are awakening. You are awakening to the vastness of your true nature as soul and spirit. You're entering non-dual awareness, not because you've denied the existence of your mind-body field, but because you have accepted its existence and inquired into it and understood it on each level that it manifests upon, all the way through from the most object and solid of perceptions, object-based, through into subtle psychic, emotional experiences, atmospheres and textures, all the way through into deep interdimensional spaces and experiences of karmas and samskaras that span thousands and thousands of years in a single frequency, and then realized you are also pure consciousness with no shape, no form, no rigid identity, that you are love, light, intelligence that has the capacity to free those contractions, to dissolve those samskaras, to dissipate, to cloud bust those clouds, and the light that you are intensifies and shines within that space of creation as you do this. So there are many levels of perception, and awakening is not just about existing on one level of awareness, non-existence, emptiness, nothingness. It's about having the freedom as emptiness, as pure transparent consciousness, to incarnate, express, create and play on all dimensions of existence. And as you enter 5D, you realize you are that creator consciousness that has access to all those dimensions of experience, and you become joyful and playful and liberated, driven not by a sense of lack or by necessity, by emptiness, by separation or by hunger, but by joy. And that is the destiny of planet Earth and all beings living on planet Earth, that we become beings of joy and creativity. But to do this, to enter that state of 5D and beyond, we need to move beyond rescuing. We've already developed our body of love, our body of light, our qualities of consciousness through many, many thousands of years. Now we need to recognize the perfection of everything. We need to honor the free will of everything and see the light in everything, to communicate as light with light, as consciousness with consciousness, as love with love. And the world of objects no longer appears as a world of objects, but as a world of love and as a world of creative possibility. So that's the potential of this time. That's the invitation that's being extended to you at this time in the Earth's history and at this point in your process of unfolding. And we are in such a magical time because we are doing this together. Doing this in groups, sharing the experience and learning to co-create a new reality on the Earth. So thank you for sharing this Q&A with us today. If you have any questions or any comments, please do email us or comment below this video, and we look forward to seeing you for the next event on Consciousness TV.